I will now ask Tine Fischer, the CPH Docs Film Festival Director, to join me now as we will both lead the conversation with, I can say legendary, I would say legendary producer and executive Ted Hope, former co-head of movies at Amazon Studios, where he oversaw for 4.5 years prestige movies which have been produced, developed and acquired by the company. But prior to joining Amazon, he himself produced more than 70 films, received numerous Academy Award nominations, won even 3 Sundance Grand Jury prizes. He was also co-founder with James Seamus of the production and distribution company Good Machine back then. And today he's also the co-founder of Double Hope together with his wife, Vanessa. He describes himself actually as a holistic film producer. I would say this is the perfect pitch for us here to discuss global streaming and the future of the independent industry, especially because Ted co-wrote, together with Anthony Kaufman, The Hope for Film, which is basically a journey of a producer across the revolutions of indie film and global streaming. So really perfect for what is happening today. And Grace was saying earlier, the digital economy tends toward monopoly. So let us now check how far the audiovisual industry is headed in the same direction. Or will there be space for a whole new independent industry targeting possibly new, younger audiences, more diverse audiences? Question marks. We're going to explore this now. And I wanted to say something very special here because we asked all the speakers throughout all the 5 days of the conference to send their own questions and we integrated them in our interview. We love to try new things here at the CPH conference. So let's go. Tine, nice to see you again. I think yes, we are the dream team for all these kind of interviews. We should make a series out of it, right?
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it.
Yes. Ted, are you here with us?
I am. Thank you.
This is wonderful. Nice to see you. This is really great. And I'm gonna start, okay?
Yes.
Because
I
was living a couple of years in New York also, and you said Ted once in an interview with Filmmaker magazine, you had these two faces or two halves of a face. Here, the more pessimist New York producer on the one hand, and here the sunny side of positive LA openness. And I wanted to ask you, don't we have the same with the independent industry, actually more based in New York and the platforms around California? Does this actually reflect the mood? Or do you think that, no, you know, like New York City has collapsed to technology-fueled generation of tech in the Californian thing and the film indie boom is done? So how is the mood? Does it reflect or not?
But both and, you know, yes, there's definitely a difference between the two, but I think both sides are, both sides exist within each community. You know, I've been working now for probably about 35 years in the indie film business. And I think like every single year that I've been in it, you hear it proclaimed, you know, the world's changing, the sky is falling, like indie film is dead, indie film is, booming. And I think that's always been true. Like there's been great transformational change occurring. But this time where we are right now, it's for real. Like it's actually happening. And you can feel it both in terms of that dread and that enthusiasm for maybe we could actually build something that is a bit more inclusive, a bit more in favor of the creators. And I think that's true whether you're in New York or LA or Copenhagen or Paris. You know.
You recognize my French accent. That's what you said, Paris, right?
It's hard to really hard not to hear it. But it's beautiful. Okay, we're going to jump on.
Yes.
Because we have so many questions coming in from people. And can I just say thank you for joining us? I know it's super early in LA, so thanks. I hope you got a coffee before.
I got my coffee, and it was fascinating conversation before to hear. Really well programmed. My mind is buzzing.
Good. I just wanted to say also congratulations on the 2 Oscars from, was it yesterday? Sound of Metal. It's opening. It's actually opening the cinemas in Copenhagen next week. So we look forward.
It's a beautiful film, and really kind of, it's a good film to look at too, in terms of what can be gained, what might be lost, right? Because it is a true representation of the potential of indie film, how work can be reached for such a high bar, but how easy it is to be overlooked. I got a nice note after the Oscar nominations, where it got 6 films and 6 nominations, and the director's agent was like, nobody was believing in this movie. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Amazon, for getting behind it and making that push. And Darius Martyr, the director, has been around for a while, working as a screenwriter frequently with Derek Say in France, and strive to make this, and for a long time. And I guess it started as a documentary and evolved into a movie. The sales agents, told me how, the cut that was initially submitted to Toronto was like 20 minutes longer. And then the last moment he made changes. And then after we acquired it, he kept cutting and working to advance it. You can't normally do that sort of constant striving and aiming to make it better in a corporate atmosphere. You certainly can't make it about that sort of subject, because it hadn't been proven. There weren't comps to look at. And, nor had, Riz Ahmed been nominated for a Best Actor Oscar before. Some of the things that like the mainstream corporate world always looks for. And, how do you keep films like this alive as the indie film ecosystem transitions to one that's dominated by global streamers, and global streamers, based in the US, English language dominant? That's a huge question. I think there's some good answers, and I think there's a lot of hope, but there's also a lot of things to be concerned with.
We've got lots of questions dealing with exactly this. Yes. So we're moving into it. I've heard so many digital panels during this year, and you've been on quite a number of them. And thanks for sharing. I want to say really thanks for sharing. I think you share a lot. You share on Twitter. You write books, and you say yes to participating on panels. And I really think it's I really appreciate it. Well, we have a question coming in from Jess Devane, who was on the panel just before. And it has to do with something that I've heard you speak about quite a number of times during this year, namely diversity and how to basically design a more inclusive industry. So, and the thing I think is really interesting with many of your answers is that you're not only speaking from an ideological or political perspective when answering, but also from a commercial. I mean, what are we actually missing by not being more focused on diverse stories and creators? So Jess is asking, and it's very short and precise question: what are the pathways to showing the market that underrepresented creators and stories are not risky or niche, but essential for societies and good for business? So what are the pathways?
Well, let me just take it back to how you set it up before answering that question, if I may, because I think it's a piece of the any creative person's practice that is absolutely necessary but frequently overlooked, right? And that is our own abilities to influence change, within the system, and how one goes about doing it, because it's a multi-pronged process where we have to look at what the business needs are the structure that gets everything made, since particularly in the US, it all is driven by business, not by, cultural concerns, unfortunately. And what can we actually achieve in the near future? How do you move things forward? I refer to it often in terms of like pattern recognition for the possible. What can you do to push the structure that you actually want that might advance your own work? And I think it's something we all have to recognize, both our capability of doing and the necessity of doing. I go back often to one of my first like great learning experiences, which was to when we made Ang Lee's second feature, The Wedding Banquet. It was a film that the industry didn't want, that they had dismissed for being gay, for being Chinese, and for feeling like a film from the 40s. But when nobody picked it up for sales, and James Schamus and I had to sell it ourselves, all the buyers remarked that the reason they liked it was because it was gay, it was Chinese, and it felt like a film from the 40s. It was familiar, but it was fresh. And they were super excited by that. And recognizing the privilege that we had as American producers of ambitiously authored work, James and I became convinced that we could use the international sales model to finance more films in that same method. And we were able to convince David Lindy to come join us at the company. And Good Machine was able to make 45 films without any financing of our own, literally half of which, we owned outright with the filmmakers, through what was then somewhat of a new model. And I think that looking forward to where there's such opportunity, we can see ways to address, questions, be it diversity and inclusion, or questions of content and what stories get told. That the beauty I've always felt about the film business is that the smartest, the most powerful, the wealthiest make colossal dumbass mistakes time and time again, right? Thankfully, right? That we're all, no one's immune to that disease of the colossal fuck up. And, so you can look first at the studios and see how they made a couple of errors getting to this moment we're in right now, right? That they thought that, in the States, we still have something called antitrust law on the books, even though it's not really enforced. But the film industry is like one of the rare industries where the corporations can't actually control the creators of the IP. In the music business in the States, you can sign someone up for a 7-year contract. You can't do that in the film business anymore, whether it's behind the camera or in front of the camera. So studios could go out and look and see that all they really felt they needed to stay in control was having the means of distribution and the power of capital, right? And that alone would ensure their longevity. But they were asleep as to what that actually meant. And they were missing the key thing, the key transformative ingredient to where we get to now. They were asleep thinking that distribution was physical distribution. And the digital companies, the FANG companies of Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, built a global distribution system far more efficient than the ones the studios had, and in the process amassed so much capital they could buy any of the studios. So the company, that whole industry was completely vulnerable. But even more importantly, they missed the key ingredient that was really needed to extract the value of the inherent utility within movies and series. And that was a direct relationship with the audience. And that's, of course, what all the digital streamers, all the global streamers have. They know who their audience is. And, we, as audience members, know exactly what the last 125 years of cinema have produced, because during the pandemic, we've been staring at the user interfaces of these different streamers and seeing work that is generally 50% or more made by people who look like me, old white men, right? If it's not made by us, it's starring us. But the global streamers have a firsthand understanding that the audience is much different, far more diversified than than I am, than looking like me. And so they have not just political or social needs to be far more inclusive, to diversify the perspectives of the work, both who tells them and who stars in them, but they have specific business needs, because you see how rapidly, as we just enter, and yet that's the other key thing to recognize. People refer to things like streaming wars or hyper competition, but it's just beginning. We're just at the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg, right?
I'm absolutely with you. Yes.
What that type of competition looks like.
Yes, no, totally. No, I'm totally with you.
Interrupt me anytime, because I'll just keep going.
Because you said something right now really great for my next question. It is exactly this, about the specific audiences. Because you said, and I want to bring it back to the documentary world for a second, or longer. Documentaries are in high demand with streamers right now. They may have a built-in audience, and their ability to attract new customers, or that these customers are passionate about their chosen subject. And as documentaries are also low in price, they are very attractive for streamers to be programmed, right? That's what you said. So my question, talking about specific audiences and etc., do the big streamers have the will to build these specific audiences around documentaries? Does it make sense to them in terms of return on investment? Or would it be actually more meaningful to have them streamed on specialized platforms to be able to build these specific audiences?
Yes, and like both, but very much so. Like I think one of the key things to recognize is what you were speaking about, of being targeted audiences at a low price point, right? That basically is the equation for efficiency. The most valuable type of audience member for a streamer is the new audience member. How do you attract new people to the platform? So people that are not only passionate about something, but have actually displayed their passion in a predictable way, are right precisely for that acquisition. And that's a really, we should come back to that point, because people sometimes miss how different the business goals of streamers are from the world of exhibition before. That it's not profit and loss so much as customer acquisition. And drilling down to what that means, I think, reveals a lot. But the challenge, and I think this is why it's a yes and answer, that the challenge is documentaries may not cost a lot. They may be able to bring on a specific new audience to that platform, but the two things that goes with that is, one, that specific audience is not very large. At this stage of hyper global competition in the streaming space, does any documentary audience represent as wide an audience as their business needs? That the opportunity cost of that capital and labor, are you going to bring enough in? And then the second piece, once you bring them in, because this is a highly specific audience, will you be able to retain them? Is there enough additional content that is somehow related to, and excuse me for using that word, but movies that are somehow related to the first one that brought them in, that they will stay on the platform and not just be another example of churn and burn. Sign up for the free week-long subscription and then hop off after they watch the few titles that represent it. That what you start, the question I guess then becomes, is documentary itself a strong enough cohort to allow the multitude of titles to keep somebody aligned on the platform?
Right.
I think that what you see from just looking at the interfaces of all the global streamers is that the global streaming business is not about curation. It is not about discovery. And it is not about adding value around a specific title. Like that's a nice dream that I think all cinephiles have, but it's something much different than that business, because the business of global streaming is about customer acquisition. And the best way to do that is to get people to all do the same thing. And what people since the beginning of time generally want is, unfortunately, what their neighbor has. They want what other people are wanting. And so you look at the interfaces and you see that they're actually all designed to promote the shiny and the new. That it's not the driving of the algorithm to give you more of what you actually want. It's more about trying to design a system for everybody to like what they get, not get what they like what they get, and because of that, I think that you see in the global streamers right now a real bias and preference for the widest audience possible, and that leads to things that are much more conceptual, that are high concept, that you get Tiger King, or even my Octopus Teacher, as much as those shows or films have been lauded to some degree. You see what they're aiming for. It very clearly is a wide audience, and it's not surprising. Like, that is, of course, Netflix's business goals. It's not as much as the more specialized titles have been, and that's like a super big challenge for us, I think, as creators, is how do we continue to have an emphasis on quality, on impact, on uniqueness and distinction in a world that is dominated by 8 global streamers, and they all are trying to get the widest possible audience. How long will it take till we actually start to care about the retention of those customers and matching people with the right things? And I think that's where you are absolutely right, that it becomes a secondary platform where curation, discovery, and value enhancement is offered. Channels.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there are quite a few platforms which were supposed to be niche, and they're actually expanding very nicely by placing themselves by niche. I'm thinking of platforms like Reverie about LGBTIQ content in the States, which are already growing very nicely. But I'm thinking also of other kind of platforms, Mubi with the cinema of auteur, but very specialized and very, very nice platforms. But anyway, I don't want to steal your next question. Do you have the next question?
Yeah, I have a question actually from but I have a good question from Carrie Lozano, who's now the director of documentary at Sundance. And we're speaking here about also the responsibility of the global streamers in terms of also sustaining an entire ecosystem. And Carrie is asking, The independent documentary funding model is becoming increasingly stretched and unsustainable, and yet the platform seems to rely on the ecosystem to develop new work and new talent. So she's asking how and do the streamers intend to find ways to support documentary support organizations that nurture and fund the pipeline? I mean, I know you're not necessarily the one to answer, but maybe you can give us a bit of insight on what they're thinking.
Sure. Well, I think like the first thing that is important to recognize, which always shocked me when I worked with inside of Amazon, and then when I've left Amazon and I've quizzed folks at the different platforms, found it to be exactly the same. And that is the strategy, whatever the business strategy is within it, for programming, changes incredibly rapidly, right? That like literally almost quarterly, if not biannually. That they are reconceiving what type of customer they're going to go after and what is the best way to do that. Far faster than ever before. I used to, when I was at Amazon and people say, "What are you looking for?" I would say, "Well, I'm going to tell you what we're looking for right now, but by the time you bring it to me, unless you have it in your back pocket, it won't be what we're looking for." And I thought we were the only company that was constantly rewriting our strategy, but it's true everywhere. Like people are reconceiving of it. So, I could say something like, documentaries or social action documentaries or documentaries about this are the most needed work, but in another 3 months, it'll be something different, right? So you have to take that with a grain of salt. But to me, what that starts to point to is precisely what I was saying before about how do we both work to alter the system, how do we enhance our own pattern recognition for possibility, and then use that to drive what we want. And I think that the answer to that is first in embracing, or at least accepting, that the streamer's needs are audience acquisition. And so the question is, can one film be reliable to acquire an entire audience segment? Of course not, right? So it speaks of, why you actually have to start to embrace a level of programming into one's conception of the work that we want to make and license. And that what that is essentially looking for other work that is aligned with your own. How do we actually target an audience segment? And that might be, across a specific demographic, whether that's auteur, work, or LGBTQ work. It might deal with, the classic, breakdowns of age, race, class, religion, gender, orientation. It might be more genre oriented. I see every year like a rise in documentary thrillers per se. It might be, we're looking for documentary love stories. What are those, and how do we bring these films together and allow them to build upon each other? What is needed to do that? Right. When audience acquisition is a primary goal, what does that do to more niche oriented content? Will the streamers' focus in documentary strictly be geared towards pop culture and global audiences? The challenge that you see is, we've built a structure and still have like corporate structures that are based on an old way of doing things. The streamers' needs are so much, quantity and speed ease of operation, maintaining a regular cadence, efficiency. How can, in what we generate and bring, how can we address those needs so that we can address our own needs at the same time? I think in trying to answer that question, there's tremendous opportunity for creators to own their work in a much more substantial way than ever before. And I think in terms of our ability to cooperate, with other creators, and start to address these programming needs, we can also have much more control over the type of work that we're able to make and license. But it requires, like anything else, tremendous cooperation and some changes in how we structure things right now.
This is great. You should actually jump into the program tomorrow. We have also a very nice thing about the future and of representation and specific challenges of new platforms. But you have a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up because, basically you talk about the change in cultural leadership through many of your answers and in many of the other talks that I've heard you participate in. And I noticed that you're going to co-lead graduate program, I think it is, at the Thunderbird School of Global Management. And I was just wondering, how do we train the new generation of cultural leaders? I guess you're preparing a program, and I'm actually next week heading as the CEO of the National Film School in Denmark. So I'm also super curious to hear your thoughts on it, just on a personal note, and more so also because in Europe the film schools, they were built in the late 50s, 60s, and they're all built both in terms of method and programs around supporting the auteur tradition. So what's the future for the film schools, and what are your thoughts on what a new generation of cultural leaders what are their skills, and are they missing some of it?
Well, thank you for that question. I think that to some degree, everything needs to be far more designed for collective practice and for looking and trying to address the issues of sustainability. It was noted that I like to refer to myself as a holistic producer, and I think that this is something that was a necessity when I started out and was essentially abandoned for a variety of reasons, but once again I think needs to become the kind of more dominant model, in that the value of an individual title to a global streaming basically is expended once it's no longer new, right? That the nature of streaming is to push, as we mentioned, the new. And I think that within that, again, recognizing streamers' goals being so much, quantity and speed, how do we get that? We'll all be able to retain the licenses of our work in a way we haven't been before, and we'll be able to retain, more of the media grants, and that also allows us to do new things. But it also requires that we are set up for that from the beginning, so that we have to generate how we're going to, serve our films through their entire life cycle. How do we create new marketing events at the end of the first 2-year license, per se? How do we have the right assets to keep the film, the work, evergreen? And we're not currently trained to do that. It was certainly the New York independent way, and in America, under the Hollywood studio system, I think a level of specialization became, vogue, or the necessity. Somebody who specializes in financing, somebody who specializes in packaging, somebody who specializes in production, somebody who specializes in distribution and marketing. And that, I don't think, will suffice anymore. And you really will have to know how to do soup to nuts. And with that, I think how we also all of us, look to the continual evolution of the ecosystem. How do we do that? How do we build that into our practice? And I think that some of the answers also are aligned with recognizing that we're no longer, strictly a geo-specific industry. All of it becomes quite global. And so you have to start to look and build alliances beyond borders in every which way. And and that again, I think is something that is not very, that we're not, trained to do. Similarly, I think that you start to need to look at how we collaborate outside our own specific field, how we collaborate, into other cultural strands. You certainly see this, I think, in the documentary space of the embrace of podcasting, almost as a test kitchen or early, development along the way. You also can, I think, start to look and see how so much work really wants to embrace a kind of 360 approach. How do we also produce a book, and how do we produce a immersive event, or live event to some form? And so I think that nobody these days can specialize into a singular type of cultural content, but we have to know how, better than ever before, how to collaborate across platforms and across forms with other creators, but both in different fields and in different environments.
Yeah,
that's
completely
great.
Agree.
Yeah. And it answers partly my last question. So I just wanted maybe to keep it to the very last point, because we are totally over time, but I really need this. So do you think that globalization of content is actually a good thing? Yes or no?
It could be a long answer.
It could be a long answer, but please make it short.
I think that we all, have to constantly interrogate ourselves in terms of what we love and where our values are and what we care about, because a lot can be lost very quickly, and it'd be so much work to regain that. I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't true that specificity, is the pathway to the universal. Like I used Ang Lee's film The Wedding Banquet before as a model, and I think that's really true. That the fact that it told a very specific story that individuals saw in themselves, that tale, whether they were not the same orientation or not the same race or not the same gender or not from the same region, they recognized, and had empathy for that situation, and it made the film work across the globe. And that wasn't a programmed film. That was somebody that was telling their individual story from their personal perspective and understanding. And I think it's really super key to do that. And I have great hopes of all of us, continuing to grow in our, media intelligence. It was only like a year ago, frankly, that I virtually knew no one that had seen a series that wasn't in their native language. And now I don't know anyone that hasn't, right?
Yeah,
that
right.
Everybody, has tried on. Yeah. And I think that you can see on the most successful of those shows, often that they're aiming now for audiences wider than their geo-specificity. But at the same time, I think that what we love is their cultural specificity. So I do think, that the access to global content hopefully will help us all recognize that we're not so, either or, this or that, but there's an entire spectrum of experience and perspective that we can relate to, even if we don't align in the most general of ways. So
Yes.
I think that I would interpret your question essentially as saying this is really a key time to double down and make sure that we maintain a cultural specificity, national cinemas, and empower those that come from different perspectives than we've experienced before. It's absolutely needed, and I think the vitality of our industry depends on it.
And I have to say, it was not my question. It was the question of Wirada Co-Curator School of Film Do, a great platform based in the UK, which is doing a fantastic work actually as a platform. And Wirada will be also our guest later on today. I really recommend you to watch this. Actually, I think the Film Do is actually quoting you on their website. You should check it out, Ted.
Okay.
Yes. Well, anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ted.
I skipped my last question about are you coming back to New York one day? But we can discuss this in the next opportunity. It was a pleasure, Ted. Thank you so much to have been with us so early in the morning. Have a great day. We are also having a good one here, right? So Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Thank you. It was really
You're
fun.
welcome.
You guys run a great program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.